Okay, we're now live.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome to this Cabinet meeting from Charnwood Borough Council on the 7th of May 2020. This is our first online Cabinet meeting, so hopefully we'll go very smoothly this evening. First of all, I'd like to say that you need to remember members of the public are viewing this meeting via the live stream, and they can only see the person who is actually speaking at the time. Also, it takes a second or two for Zoom to switch between different views. So if you could probably just count to 1 before you start speaking, that would probably help us. So this virtual meeting is being live streamed as a public meeting. It will also be recorded and the sound recording subsequently made available via the council's website. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. So first of all, I'm going to ask all of the participants of this meeting whether they can see, hear and talk as part of this meeting. So I'm going to start with the councillors. Councillor Barclay.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boker.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader.
Councillor Harper-Davies.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader.
Councillor Mercer.
I can hear you.
Councillor Poland.
I can hear you, Leader.
Councillor Rowlings.
I can hear you.
Councillor Smidovic.
I can hear you.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, we can't actually hear you. Councillor Taylor.
It shows mute on the screen.
Councillor Taylor. Yeah. We're having a small technical problem with Councillor Taylor. I think we can't actually quite hear her when she speaks. She might try the headphones. Maybe if you just try the headphones, then that might help.
Shall I text her?
If you can, yes, please. So apologies for this. Everything was working perfectly up until about 30 seconds ago.
I haven't got her mobile. Do you want me to email her? Oh, here we go. She's been muted by the host, she said.
Ah. Can we just make sure that she's unmuted?
She is currently unmuted.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, can you hear me? Yeah. I still can't hear Councillor Taylor. Okay, can I ask Matt whether you can actually have another quick go to see whether we've got a technical problem, and otherwise I'm going to go through the officer call and then I'll come back to Councillor Taylor. So can I'm now going to ask the other people partaking in this meeting, which are officers and also Councillor Draycott, whether they can actually hear me as well. Chief Exec.
Yes, I can hear you, Leader.
Thank you. Simon Jackson.
Yes, Leader, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Adrian Ward.
Yes, Leader, I can hear.
Thank you very much. Richard Bennett.
Leader, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Matt, I'm assuming you can hear us.
Can indeed.
Excellent. Karen Widdowson.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Laura Strong.
Yes, Leader, thank you. I can hear you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Draycott, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Taylor and just have one last go. Councillor Taylor, can you actually hear and respond?
Leader.
Fantastic. Well done. Best moment yet so far, hopefully. Okay, thank you very much. We're all present in that case and we're all communicating, so that's brilliant. So going on to item 1, apologies. No apologies have been received. Item 2, disclosures of pecuniary and personal interests. I have a personal interest pecuniary one, which is that I'm a director of the LGM, and as such, I will not be present for item 7, which is the item on the insurance. So I will be muted and left be leaving the meeting at that point. I will come back in briefly before we close the meeting, though. So are there any other items that anyone needs to declare before we move on? Okay, I can't see any other items that need to be declared. So we're now going to move on to item 3, which is leaders' announcement. I would just like to say a few words. This has been an extraordinary few weeks, unlike any other period that any of us have lived through. Nationally and locally, we have been tested. Many of our family, colleagues, and residents have been struck down by the virus. Several have been admitted to hospital, and I'm afraid some have not survived. But the crisis is not over yet. It may barely, in fact, have begun, but we must adapt and find a way to live with it over the coming months. It is clear that online public meetings like this one will be the new standard. We will not be holding meetings at Southfields until the crisis has passed, and it is safe for all colleagues, including the most vulnerable, to be together again. Until then, as every part of the council adapts to a new way of supporting residents and delivering services, its democratic structures must also change too, to ensure the same rigor and scrutiny and quality of debate, whilst remaining accountable and transparent. So finally, along with colleagues on Cabinet and beyond, I would like to pay my thanks to the Chief Executive, his officers, and the Council's contractors for the support they have given to residents and businesses across Charnwood over the past few weeks. They have been outstanding and have made a significant difference to so many lives. So thank you. So we're now going to move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. What I'm going to do is go through each cabinet member and ask you to verbally confirm that you approve the minutes. If you don't approve the minutes, by all means, just say reject, but otherwise say approve if you do approve of the minutes. So I'm going to go through a quick roll call. Councillor Barclay.
Approve, Leader.
Councillor Boker.
Approve, Leader.
Councillor Harper-Davies.
Approve, Leader.
Councillor Mercer.
Approve.
Councillor Poland.
Leader.
Councillor Rawlings.
Approve.
Councillor Smitovich.
Approve.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, I'm afraid we're going to have another go.
Approve, Leader.
Excellent. I approve as well. So that means that we have 100% approval of the minutes. So with that, we're going to go on to item 5, which is questions under Cabinet Procedure 10.7. Councillor Draycott has asked 2 questions. The first one is on commercial property investment. And I'm going to ask Councillor Taylor, who hopefully is still with us in the meeting, whether you would like to read out the question or take the question as read, and also the response as read. And if you do, then I can ask you whether you wish to take a supplementary question. Councillor Draycott.
Thank you. I'll take the question as said, and would just like to make a short supplementary question and statement only.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to start the timer.
First of all, I'd like to thank the leader of the council and officers for the answer regarding my question to do with commercial property investment and new post. The appointment of this post holder was critical to the success of the council continuing to deliver its services and maintaining its staff during this financial year. The answer shows a change to the job description for the post holder, moving more now to leading in the recovery programme and not as agreed by council to find commercial opportunities which we hoped would bring in vital income to the council, now desperately needed even more. The government has helped the council with funding over this period of COVID-19, but in no way will it cover the total increased expenditure. Indeed, the Local Government Association has warned that 3 to 4 times more will be needed for councils. My question to the leader, therefore, is when will councillors have a full oversight of the current budget? I see yesterday the first report is not intended until July. Cannot it be earlier? And will the new job description for this post holder and the salary costs be made available to members? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Draycott. I'm going to ask actually our Chief Exec, because I know there's a paper coming to Cabinet on the recovery plan, which will cover many of these points. And I'd just like to ask the Chief Exec to confirm the dates when the paper will be coming to Cabinet, because that may help Councillor Draycott to understand the timings. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so there is a Cabinet report due in June. I believe the date is the 7th of June. It's the 4th of June, my mistake. And there will be an opportunity at Scrutiny Commission to review that. Just also picking up Councillor Draycott's points in regards to the job description and change in role. The job description is still as approved. The matter is a head of service matter, so it's a matter for me rather than council in regards to the job description. But as Councillor Draycott correctly points out, the original emphasis of the job was linked to commercial property. That will remain the case, but obviously we're hopeful that the role will also play a part in the recovery agenda, and we will be bringing details to Cabinet and then later to Council in the year in regards to our budget and all of the implications associated with the coronavirus impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Exec. Councillor Draycott, I'm now going to move on to your second question, which relates to business rates relief educational establishments. Again, can I ask you whether you would like to take the question and answer as read, and in which case move on to your supplementary question or statement?
Would like to take it as read and just move on to supplementary and statement, please.
Thank you very much. I think the clock's going to start on the 5 minutes, and if you'd like to start.
Again, thank you, Leader and officers, for the answer to my question. I ask this to first raise the issue of business rate relief, because this anomaly of private educational establishments being able to claim to be charities has been used now for many years, and as a result get a reduction of 80% off their business rates, which most businesses cannot do. It is, though, a loophole that is finally being highlighted. Earlier this year, the government announced as part of its budget a full review of business rate relief, and MPs are currently scrutinising this relief. And also that includes educational establishments. Scotland has already agreed to end this business rate relief for educational establishments in September this year, and councils across the country are indeed challenging this loophole. Nearer to home, this is a terrible time, as you mentioned, Leader, that we are facing with COVID-19, and many challenges are being met head-on, including here in this council, who are doing a brilliant job. I do feel the university and private schools are missing an opportunity to earn more goodwill in our borough and have been rather silent during this time. Rather than continuing in the short term to take this low-cost option, they need to show that we are all in this together as a borough and consider foregoing in this financial year at least 10% of the £7.9 million that is saved, and that's the latest figure, 2018-19, so that services and jobs are protected. So 10% would raise £750,000, in fact £750,000. I would like to ask the question, would the Leader agree to start a dialogue with the university and other educational establishments along the lines I have suggested in order to protect jobs and services in the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the statement, Councillor Draycott. A couple of small points. One, business rate policy is actually set by national government, not borough councils. So this isn't something that we have any influence or control over. Secondly, business rate retention actually predominantly goes to central government rather than actually the borough council. So any changes, of course, are actually set nationally and relate to us locally. Again, this is not something we have control over. I'm going to ask Councillor Barclay whether there's anything that he wishes to add on the basis that rates come under his cabinet portfolio.
Thank you, Leader. I think you've said it already. It is central government policy. The university is a separate organisation. We don't have jurisdiction over them. I actually don't think Scotland is abolishing no business rates relief for educational establishments, and it is a very complex issue which will be looked into by government. But education and education of our young people is critical in the development of this country, and particularly going forward. But really, it isn't something under our control, and central government, I believe our government is looking at it in September, but there isn't anything else I can add. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barclay, and thank you very much, Councillor Draycott. I'm now going to move to items 6 and 7. So we're going to take the actual reports themselves as read, but we're going to then carry on with the detailed discussion of each of the items. So we go to item 6 to start off with, which is the Bedford Square Gateway project. We have Richard Bennett, who's our Head of Planning and Regeneration, here to assist us with any questions. But I'm going to start by really just outlining some of the benefits that I see from the report that's come to us this evening. As many of you will be aware, Wards End and Bedford Square are quite distinctive areas within Loughborough. In retail terms, they have a huge number of thriving independent stores, many smaller in size, many offering everything from cafes to small sort of retail outlets, all of which are providing quite a vibrant environment for our town centre. However, the pavements are quite narrow, parking is not necessarily clear, and the identity of this part of town, to be honest, is something that we've been looking at for the last 3 or 4 years to see if we can't actually improve the public realm and actually support the businesses that actually occupy the area. So this scheme that has come to us this evening is something that has been worked on for the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, it came to this cabinet almost 2 years ago to actually start on the early stages before sort of detailed design. What we have this evening is a much more detailed proposal, but we're being asked for in principle support. The scheme itself has been financially underwritten by not only the borough, but also business rates retention through the LEP to the tune of almost £600,000. And that's obviously quite a significant investment in Loughborough and something that, to be honest, in the current business environment is going to be very hard to replicate because of the needs across the whole of the county from LEP funding. So this is something that I think if we can progress will actually be probably one of the first physical improvements in Loughborough in response to the crisis that we're currently going through. And hopefully the works will actually go a long way to support the recovery of our economic town centre by actually improving the public realm, by making the area far more attractive and also more accessible. There have been various discussions about car parking spaces. To be clear, on Thursday and Saturday, the two most busiest days in Loughborough, the number of car parking spaces, in fact, will not be reduced. The remaining of the week, there are a few spaces, and Richard Bennett can actually discuss these in maybe a bit more detail, which may not be replaced. However, it's also important to remember that within about 150 yards of the area that we're talking about, there are over 1,000 spaces available in our car parks. And that's something that means that this is a very accessible area already. But to be frank, at the moment, with narrow pavements, is not particularly good in relation to social distancing and some of the requirements that we know we're going to have to live with for some time to come. So hopefully this actually helps not only as part of our general recovery, but also will support the business recovery locally. So with that, I'm going to open up for debate amongst Cabinet. So if anyone wishes to talk to this item, by all means, please raise a hand. I'm going to initially ask Richard Bennett. I almost gave you a title, Richard. Richard Bennett, to add any additional points that he wishes to make in addition to those that I've covered before we actually ask for additional comments. I can see Councillor Rawlings would like to come in after Richard Bennett.
Thank you, Leader. Richard Bennett, Head of Planning and Regeneration. As you've already introduced, this scheme has quite a long incubation period, dates back to about 2016. And the important thing to say is it's a scheme that's been brought forward in discussion with key stakeholders, and in particular, the Task and Finish group taken from the Loughborough Town team. They shaped the aims and objectives that have guided the final scheme design that's in Appendix 1 to the report. Importantly, the proposals have been subject to consultation and engagement with not just that Task and Finish group, but also the shops, businesses and other stakeholders and organisations that have an interest in the area, and as well as the general public. And we've done that through 3D animations, exhibitions, sketch designs, explaining how the scheme has evolved over time and responded to the challenges that have been identified. We've used a variety of different media, website, Twitter, social media, as well as traditional public exhibitions in the town centre to engage with people. And it's been a well-attended process by people. A summary of what folk have said through that engagement exercise is one of the background papers to this report, which members can see. We've also done some face-to-face surveys with people coming to visit the town centre to get a better understanding of why they're coming to the town centre and what sorts of things they like when they come to visit the town centre, which is quite instructive around understanding people's desire for a more experiential a better experience in the town centre. It's not just about shopping, it's about coming together, it's about using public space and having longer stays in the town centre and a richer experience. So that's really quite important, particularly in terms of how we look to see the use of town centres going forward. As I say, a summary of that engagement is a background paper, but in response to the consultation responses and the survey information, we have made amendments and improved the scheme design within those agreed aims and objectives, and the report summarises those in paragraph 7.9, so there's a full list of the changes there. We've also taken the opportunity to undertake road safety audits and also mobility audits earlier this year as a means to check the feasibility of the scheme design to ensure it's accessible by not just road users, but by all sectors of the community and the population. So that's an important stage in the process. Leader, you mentioned the parking issue. At the moment, there are 65 parking bays in the area, which falls in terms of its availability to 55 on market days. The scheme design before you proposes 55 parking bays at all times. and of which a number of those are to support blue badge holders, and in particular at Devonshire Square, the 14 blue badge bays at Devonshire Square. The shop owners and businesses requested 9 spaces to be specifically designated blue badge bays on the east side of Devonshire Square, but 5 bays on the west side to be open use bays for use by blue badge holders, but also other people. But importantly, they are of a size that will enable us to revert to blue badge spaces if required. So it's an important point to draw to members' attention. So the other points to just make members aware of is around the costings. That the report does cover the budget for the scheme. The total estimate at the moment is £2.2 million, of which 1.91 million has been identified, which means there is a shortfall. I think it's important to say that there will be a value engineering exercise on that final scheme design to see how revisions can bring the costs down to budget. But the report does seek approval for myself to seek further match funding from other organisations to assist with any shortfall that might be there. Failing that, the report does ask for to prioritise the phasing of the project, so that if there is in the final analysis a shortfall of budget, the lesser priorities, which are seen as being the Bedford Square South car park scheme in the first instance, would fall off the scheme to be revisited perhaps in later years. So I'm very happy to take any questions that members might have on the report, Leader. I'm sure there are lots of things that members might wish to get into the detail of.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we have 4 questions. We have Councillor Rawlings, followed by Councillor Harper-Davies, followed by Councillor Poland, followed by Councillor Mercer. So I'll start with Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Leader. What I was most interested in initially was from the update report in relation to businesses and the responses that they've given. And it's clear that it's overwhelmingly positive, and clearly the investment is going to be welcome into Loughborough. Also, the funding that's coming from the LEP is very important to make this project doable. So it's clear there are some very obvious benefits to Loughborough. And I think investment as we come out of this post-coronavirus world, whatever that looks like, will be important, so we can do what we can to support the high street. That said, the cost of the scheme has risen significantly since it was first considered in 2016, and I can see the response that's been given to Councillor Draycott as part of the pre-decision scrutiny that looks at why those costs have risen. But I'm not quite sure on the detail as to how they've gone up so much in the last 4 years. And I think what I'd be keen to know is what assurances officers can give that the costs aren't going to rise in a similar way that they have done over the last 3 or 4 years, which would make this project clearly not viable and something that we just won't be able to go ahead with. So I suppose the question is, are officers confident that the costs won't rise in the same way as they have done over the last 4 years, so we can actually achieve this? And what I'm slightly apprehensive about is that we commit X amount of money to it now, get partway through the process, and then find that the costs are just simply too much, and then we potentially would have wasted money. But like I say, I go back to the first thing I said. It is clear there are some really significant benefits to this idea. I'm supportive of it. I think it's just those assurances that I'm after.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. Through you, Leader. So the original Bedford Square Gateway project was estimated on our behalf by the County Council, who at that time were providing project support on this scheme. Their estimate was based on prices from 2016, but they didn't include the professional fees and various other aspects around legal agreements and procurement of the procurement process for consultants and that sort of stuff. So what we've seen actually is a reassessment of the scheme costs in 2019, which saw the cost rise from 780 to around £1 million. So the budget that was sought from Cabinet was based on from Council originally, was based on those numbers that were provided to us by the County Council, taking their advice. What we've actually seen while the Borough Council has taken over this project is that there are some very considerable costs around procurement and around legal agreements, and also the maintenance sum for the works for a 50-year period, which have added on top of the costs of the actual physical building works. So we've seen the costs rise, and I think the other thing to mention is that through consultation, we've tried to address the concerns that many businesses have had, which have added to the scheme design as well. So we have seen a significant increase from what was originally an estimate, a bit of a finger in the air job from our advisors in the start of the process. Nevertheless, I think that now we've been able to work up a scheme design to this stage, we are fairly confident about the cost estimates. Clearly, the longer we wait to appoint contractors, then the more costs are going to be affected by inflation and other supply and demand factors. So we need to be aware of that. I should say that we are still working on the basis of estimates. We haven't received any bids from contractors for the work, so that's when we'll know what the final cost will be. But also just to remind members that we are going to go through a process of trying to what they call value engineer this scheme in an effort to drive out efficiencies and cost savings from different choice of materials and different ways of doing things through the build process. So I think to answer your question, Councillor Rowlands, I don't think we're going to see a big leap in costs. It might be that costs increase slightly, but there's also an opportunity to make some savings on the costs as well. So until we get that final price from contractors, I can't put a definite figure on it, but I would make reference to the fact that Cabinet will have another opportunity to consider whether it wishes to proceed with this scheme when we bring a report to Cabinet in September with a request to appoint contractors or not.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Harper-Davies was next.
Thank you, Leader. Richard, I think it's a very welcome scheme, and I think it's one that's certainly needed. My question was similar to Councillor Rollins in relation to the affordability, and obviously I guess we would never ever have expected to be in the position of this unprecedented crisis that we're in. And in light of that, we know we are in a position that we can afford the scheme because it is a significant amount of money. You've sort of partially answered that with Councillor Rollins, but I think mine was just concerned because of what we're going through, that the figures are the figures, and that as a council we are in a position to be able to, if we vote positively this evening, to proceed with the scheme. That was the first question. The second is the timeline. Obviously, because of the crisis, will the time frame that when we move into subject to the scheme going ahead, would it allow us to get back on our feet? That's the second one. And then the third question, it was in relation to the consultation paper, which is a separate paper that we had, and I apologise, I couldn't find any answers to the questions, and it was really it was the second paragraph on page 3, and that was related to issues and questions raised at the specific consultation meeting. And the first question was, what assistance could be given to address the number of empty units in the town centre, and obviously I guess revival or regeneration of the centre. and then did talk about on the third bullet point the business rate relief. So I couldn't actually find any answers to the questions on that, and these were the consultation questions. They might be answered in a different paper. But I was just concerned that they were raised, but I couldn't see any answers to the relative queries. Thank you, Leader.
Through you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Harper-Davis. I picked up the second two parts of that question. Perhaps we'll come back to the first part when I've answered the second two. But if your first one was about the timing, at the moment we've set out a programme to realise the appointment of a contractor in October, with street work starting in January. There has been a conversation about whether potentially we could bring the commencement of street works forward in time to try and get the works away quicker. The reason it has been scheduled to start in January was to avoid the fair,
Christmas
actually.
time.
Yeah, and Christmas time, which is seen as a peak period for trading. But given where we are at the moment, the question's being asked as to whether we could actually bring the works forward to get them completed sooner, so we can be seen to be responding quicker to the pandemic and the need for economic recovery and to support businesses. I think there is a truism, you know, this kind of work will be intrusive and present a further challenge to local businesses. But my view is that in order for the high street to thrive in the longer term, it's crucial that the council acts now to provide that foundation stone for economic recovery. And one that can be sustained into the future. And of course, we are conscious about the risk of losing the match funding that we've already managed to secure. So, you know, it's a bit of short-term pain for longer-term gain, I would suggest. So we are looking at the possibility of whether we can start earlier. What I would say about that is it comes down to the availability of contractors and how quickly we can get through all the legal agreements that are necessary to, you know, the traffic regulation orders and the authority to do works on the highway, which we need to get from the county council. So some of that stuff's not in our control. In terms of the consultation question, I think I recall the part of the consultation you're referring to and the specific request for business rate relief. Now, I'm not an expert on business rates, and I know Simon's party to the meeting. He may be able to assist, but as I understand it, most or many of the businesses in the town centre fall below the threshold for business rates anyway. So they perhaps wouldn't benefit from that relief. But if members were minded to look at potential business rates, that's something that could be looked at separately as part of another paper, another decision. And could you just remind me of the first question, please?
Yeah, it was just because of the unprecedented crisis, and obviously the financial plan is set out, and you know it's just the affordability around the plan, which Councillor Rollins' question was related to. So it's just really the confidence to be able to say yes, we can afford it in spite of the crisis that we're going through.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Leader. So I think the thing to say is that the Bedford Square scheme is a priority in the corporate strategy. It's something that's been set out there, and budget has been made available through the capital plan. And we have secured some match funding. There is a shortfall of around £300,000 for the full scheme at the moment. So I think the question for members is really one of around, is this a scheme that they want to bring forward at this time in light of the challenges that are facing the high street? Do they see it as being adding to that challenge, or do they see it as being part of the potential solution? My view is the latter, that it is an important part of the foundation to establish an economic and sustained economic recovery moving forward. And I worry that if this opportunity is not taken to improve the public realm in this part of town, the opportunity may not come around again for some time. So I think in terms of affordability, the budget has been made available through the capital plan. I know that it's a scheme that the whole capital plan is something that I know members are wanting to look at and review in light of the various different financial challenges that there are in the organisation. So really the matter of affordability is one for members at this stage.
Thank you, Leader.
Okay. So we have a few more councillors who wish to speak. So the list so far, I've got Councillor Poland next, followed by Councillor Mercer, followed by Councillor Barclay, followed by Councillor Taylor, I think, and then Councillor Smitovich. So and then finally, I think the only one who hasn't spoken is Councillor Boker, but I think you're probably going to be seconding. So hopefully you'll have a chance to, unless you have any questions for Richard Bennett. So first off is Councillor Poland.
Thank you, Leader. Richard, you talked in the presentation about the importance of experience in the visit to the town centre, and I think that's an absolutely vital point. I think that's been the case in truth for a while now, since you can go to out of town shopping centres and supermarkets and so forth. But I think post Corona, it's only going to grow in importance as people get more used to doing things online. This is an example of exactly that. We wouldn't have thought even a few weeks ago that we'd be looking at online meetings, yet here we are, and they may become the norm. Likewise, online shopping, I suspect, will be something that will become increasingly part of everyone's day-to-day lives. So with that in mind, I think creating something that increases the experience for people coming to Loughborough, give them something they can't get online. If this helps with that, then fantastic for me. A question, if I can, just on the funding. We obviously getting some funding from the LEP. Is there, that's a very welcome and significant piece of cash, but is there a limit, sort of time limit on when we spend that, sort of a deadline, if you like? That's my question. Thank you.
Through you, Leader, I'm not aware that there's a specific deadline on spending the LEP funding. Clearly, the LEP has committed it within their programme. I look to my colleagues around the table, Chief Executive perhaps, who could illuminate us further on that point.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Leader. There is no absolute cut-off date with regards to the LEP funding. But we are part of a round of bids that have been approved by the LEP, and there will be expectation of progress with those projects, and we will be required to report back to the LEP in terms of the progress that we're making or not. And of course, the LEP could at a future date decide that the project wasn't progressing, or because of decisions we'd made was no longer good value for money for the LEP. Although I think that's unlikely if we continue on the present course. But at the moment, with the LEP investment alongside ours, it is good value for money for the council, given the level of their investment. So we would certainly want to retain that to ensure that we can deliver the maximum benefit for the best value for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think at that point, we're going to the next in line. Sorry, my screen grid has just suddenly changed, so apologies. So I'm looking at everyone. Who was next? I've got a feeling it was probably Councillor Mercer. Thank you very much. Over to Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Leader. Richard, can I ask a couple of questions? The first was about the blue badge parking. I don't think anybody would say that there shouldn't be any blue badge parking, but there was a concern expressed to me by a number of shopkeepers that sometimes it's impossible for non-blue badge parkers to park, and yet there's nobody in those bays. And I think it's something that changes with time. And is it, do you envisage it to be a somewhat flexible way of altering the parking? If there's more demand for blue badge parking, then more, and if there's less, then perhaps a bit less. That's one of the concerns. The second is a lot of the shops in Bedford Square are shops that serve people who just pop in very quickly to buy something, whether it be the post office, the dry cleaning, George Hill for a bottle of wine. And sometimes people only park there for a matter of 10, 15 minutes at a time. And there was a lot of concern from shopkeepers that when the work starts, that there will be no parking at all whilst it happens. So do we envisage the process of the building work will allow at least half of Bedford Square to be available for parking at any time? And a couple of the shopkeepers, the convenience store and the chip shop, said when the bus stop on Southfield Road was removed, their business went down 20%. And their concern is if there's no parking for quite a period of time, they simply won't have any business at all, or very little business. So those are my two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mercer, and through you, Leader. Some very good questions there. I think dealing first with the blue badge parking, one of the things that came out through the consultation was the very points that you picked up from local traders around the amount of blue badge parking and whether there was too much in certain areas of the area. I think the first thing to say is that all the parking bays that are within the scheme have been designed to size that enables them to be blue badge compliant. That gives us some flexibility going forward. My understanding is that a blue badge parking bay needs to be designated through regulation to give it the status. But nevertheless, in the Devonshire Square area, in response to traders' requests, for the 14 bays, only 9 of them have been identified as blue badge bays on the, I think it was the east side of Devonshire Square, with the 5 on the west side. I may have got it the wrong way around. Being for all users, and of course all users could include people with blue badges. I think the key driver of the one of the key aims of the scheme is to ensure that we are getting a transfer of public realm from car users to pedestrians and cyclists. So the kind of on-street parking that we were getting on the double yellow lines is something that the scheme envisages that regulation will remove that opportunity, because it was seen by members of the public and traders as actually being a safety issue. Cars parked on street on double yellow lines, whether they're blue badge holders or otherwise, were seen as a barrier to free flow of pedestrians and cyclists, and cluttered up the public realm. In terms of the building works and the availability of parking for businesses as we go forward, one of the things that we will need to work out is from the contractor is the method statement for the rollout of works over the construction period, including how they intend to keep open areas of the scheme area to enable people to park so that businesses can maintain, trading essentially. And it's not just parking that's the issue here. It's also being able to provide visibility to the businesses that might be behind hoardings that have been put up to protect the public from falling down, roadworks and this sort of stuff. And part of the package will be not just communications and managing communications directly, but also having active hoardings, with sort of artwork on the hoardings and visibility that the businesses are alive and well behind them. So that's going to be an important strand of the contractual arrangements with any contractor.
Sorry, that was my fault. Apologies. Thank you very much, Richard. We're next. It's Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's very difficult to know how the world's going to emerge from this coronavirus. There's nobody here that knows. It's difficult enough on a project like this to assess all the risks. But one thing I think is well worth doing. The reasons to go for it are far more than those not to go for it. One of the things that really I'll come back to is the financing of it. When we come back to Cabinet in October, we will have been out on a procurement process. We will have much more certainty about the cost. But even then, there must be some contingency. I know we're doing value engineering. I know we're trying to reduce the cost, but inevitably with a project of this size, there has to be some allowance for overspend. And when we come back in October, I really would like to see a realistic approach. No matter how horrible it is, the truth and the real cost of it is essential to have. What I don't think would be fair to anybody is to find out that we haven't assessed the financing of it properly, and actually we're going to end up with something nothing like we originally thought, and we're having to knock off not just one phase but two phases of it. I just wonder if that will be possible.
Through you, Leader. Yes, Councillor Barclay. That is the intention. The full expected costs of the scheme, including any contingency, will be put to members with a request to consider the project and its costs and its risks, and seeking a go no go decision.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, Councillor Barclay. Next person in the queue is Councillor Taylor.
Better now. Just a question about the contractors. Obviously, with the current climate and social distancing likely to be here for a very long time, have we got any concerns about how we'll be able to get contractors on board and whether that will come at a premium, and how their ability to work as social distancing during the project and with people around as well, that we might have to end up paying a lot more for the contractors that we currently think we will?
Through you, Leader. Yes, that's a very realistic possibility, Councillor Taylor, and it's an issue that the project board that's overseeing this project has added to the risk register and is actively seeking to manage. One of the things that we've asked the consultants that are supporting us in the design and feasibility stage to do is to start scoping out contractors that might sit on the ESPO contract framework to see what their availability is like, and what kind of risks and difficulties and challenges they might foresee going forward, particularly around the issues you just mentioned around social distancing and construction method statements and that sort of stuff, so we can get a feel for what this might mean for costs, or actually more importantly their availability going forward.
Thank you very much, Richard. Are you okay with that, Councillor Taylor? Yep, thanks a lot. Okay, the next person on our list was Councillor Smitovich.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Partly some observations. A lot of what I was wanting to ask has already been dealt with, which is probably a relief to you. Couple of words I picked up was challenge, and it certainly will be a challenge, and improvements. So obviously with improvements, it'll be a positive challenge, and something really pleasant and attractive will come out of it. But balanced against that, a couple of concerns. I mean, the parking was picked up, and particularly outside the post office, it's been a nightmare many times with cars blocking and on the pavement completely for people to pick up parcels to take in. So very conscious of that in this area. But equally, I'm taking myself back about 4 or 5 years ago when there was a lot of work done in that part of Ward's End, where we talk about narrow pavements and so on. And I appreciate that we've talked about business relief as well, but I do remember that postcodes came into it, and one part of Ward's End were able to recoup some money from the bid because of loss of income, but the other half couldn't, for various reasons at that time. And in fact, I think it was two never picked up the money they had lost and couldn't get, you know, a sort of a grant to fill the gap. So I am conscious that I'm thinking of there was no pain, you know, there'll be a gain and without some pain sort of thing. But I do have a bit of a worry about that, as to how much they'll lose and perhaps feel they won't be able to recoup it. And probably the last thing is, in doing the exercise for fighting for a few of the shops at the time and trying to get some answers for them, I became very aware of somebody who gave me an awful lot of the history and you know, the shape of war. There was tremendous conservation there that had been ignored at the time, and it took a while to prove that background, that history and heritage, which you know, it was recognised in the end. But I think for many people in Loughborough, this little part of town is very distinctive. It's not a clone of any other town. And I just want to be able to balance the moving forward and improvement and challenge with retention of something, whether it's shop frontage, the type of shop, they're different. And I think that's really important if we're going to make a success with all the money that's being spent. And finally, and it was probably back, I think it was when Richard started to speak. It's something I may come back to separately, Richard, afterwards, because I don't want to go off track. But I thought you made a comment, and it might be just that I didn't hear it very clearly, when you were talking about costs in county council. I thought I heard the word oversight. If I did hear the word oversight, then I'd like to just not pick up on it now necessarily, but perhaps on another occasion. Thank you, Leader.
Through you, Leader, I wasn't sure there was a specific question from that, but that in terms of just responding to some of the things that you said, in terms of, I think you were saying that the you know, the special character of the Ward End Bedford Square area was something that was important, and I think you were expressing some concern that that's not lost through any of the works that might be carried out. And I think the thing that might bring you some comfort is that the aims and objectives of this project have been agreed by the Town Team Task and Finish group. You know, these are the key stakeholders in this exercise, and have been subject to you know, the consultation with the local businesses as well, and the public. And I think overwhelmingly the consensus is that this is a good scheme, and bearing in mind that it doesn't actually affect any of the shops themselves. It is literally the public realm in front of those shops and the highway. And I think the desire to give up highway to public realm and to improve the amount of space that there are for pedestrians and other users, cyclists, is seen to be a good thing. And in particular, the opportunity to create what I would call workable space, where you can hold events and you know, have a better experience around the market, you know, in the Devonshire Square area is seen as a very positive addition to the experience that people will have in this area going forward, and something that is worth you know, visiting, you know, coming to Loughborough to visit the Wards End Bedford Square area, because it offers something different to any other place.
That's what I'm after.
The leader already mentioned, you know, the independent traders and the unique offer that they provide. So so I think you know, you can be assured that, you know, that unique heritage and and character that we've got in the area will be carried forward with these proposals. I'm not specifically aware of the points you were making about the way that the business rate mechanism works. I do recall a discussion with you 5 or 6 years ago about, there was a couple of traders, I think one of them went out of business sadly, in the end, without being able to benefit from accessing that relief. That unfortunately I'm not familiar with how the finance mechanism works for that relief that was available at that time. The last point was around oversight. I don't think I said oversight. I think the point
I wasn't sure. That's why I was not wanting to push it too much. But
the point I was trying to make is that the Borough Council at the start of this exercise 4 years ago was being advised by the County Council, who provided advice to all districts in public realm schemes and procurement and scheme design. Now, because of the funding challenges that the County Council has, it hasn't been able to continue with that support, I'm afraid, and the Borough Council's had to backfill that, which has come at quite a considerable additional cost, which was not factored into the costings back in 2016. The estimates of costs back in 2016, which were updated in 2019, didn't include the other costs that arise from procurement and the legal agreements and final technical drawings that the County Council would have assisted on, and they do come with quite a considerable additional cost. So that's a reason for why the costs have increased, as well as trying to address some of the challenges and concerns that have come through consultation, which have meant additions to the scheme design that come with additional costs. So I think we have ended up in a place which is just above the budget that we've got available, but there is scope to bring that cost down, but whilst also recognizing on the other hand that prices do go up. We haven't had a quote yet from a contractor, and that might be different from what the estimated cost that's been suggested to us by our consultants. So I think the key point is that members will be given an opportunity to consider the full quotation and costs, including the contingency, in September, or when that report comes back to members, asking you to consider the final scheme and costs and whether to go or not to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I just needed clarification. I have taken that on board fully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, Councillor Sminovich. Now, finally, Councillor Boker.
Thank you, Leader. A lot of interesting questions and concerns there, and I shall try and just summarise this very quickly. It's important that we realise that this is a community-led project. It's not stuff that we've just thought up ourselves. And today we are only seeking approval for the scheme in principle. Final details of implementation will be sought over the summer until another report comes to us at Cabinet in September to approve final plans and implementation in phases. So the whole area will not be closed in one go. We will know a lot more about this COVID crisis by September and can adjust those implementation plans accordingly for the September Cabinet report. And I'm sure Richard has made a note of any concerns that you have about social distancing, etc. This is just one part of future investment in the town centre, which I'm sure our residents will expect us to do, and not just allow our town centre to go backwards rather than forwards. We need to plan now for when restrictions are raised next year, and I think someone, perhaps it was James or Roy, said that the town centre will become even more important in people's lives as somewhere that they can go for leisure, entertainment. And the whole point of this scheme is to increase footfall at the top end of our high street, or shall we say our town centre. The scheme is supposed to encourage more shopping in that area and not less. and I'm sure in terms of disruption, it will all be kept to as minimal as possible, and hence that's why it's in phases. I believe this is an excellent public realm project, and I fully support it as lead member for Loughborough. It's going to be an important part of our recovery, and I think if we don't go ahead with it now, we're seriously going to fall behind with that recovery scheme. So I hope you will join me in supporting the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bokler. Very good points clearly made. So a good way to probably finish the debate on this particular item. So we've all had an opportunity to express our views on this paper. I think Councillor Bokler summarised it perfectly at the end there. This is something that we need to get on with to show our commitment to Loughborough and show our commitment to our retailers to try and actually make the shopping environment so much better in Loughborough and hopefully as a result lead our way out of the recovery that we so need. So with that, I'm going to move recommendations 1 to 5 for reasons given 1 to 5. And can I ask Councillor Bokler to second?
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to second this item.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to take the vote on this one. I'm going to again do a roll call. If you could answer just for or against, I would be very grateful. Starting off with Councillor Barclay.
For, Leader.
Councillor Bokler.
Obviously for, Leader.
Councillor Harper-Davies.
For.
Councillor Mercer.
For.
Councillor Poland.
For.
Councillor Rollings.
For.
Councillor Smidovich. Councillor Smidovich.
It's muted.
You need to unmute.
I didn't mute.
For or against, Margaret?
For.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't unmute it. I mean, I didn't have, it wasn't crossed.
That's okay. Don't worry. Councillor Taylor.
For.
Okay, and I'm for as well. So that's 100%. And the item passes. Thank you very much. Now, at this point, item 7, which is the insurance arrangements, I'm going to leave the room, which means I'm going to mute myself and also turn off the video. And I'm going to ask Councillor Barclay to carry on sharing this item, and hopefully you'll let me back in before we close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. So this is agenda item 7, which in simple terms is renewal of the council's insurance contract with our existing insurers for another 12 months. We had hoped that the local government mutual would be able to come up with a quote, a competitive quote. That has not proven to be the case. And we are asked here to extend the contract for a further 12 months till the 31st of May 2021. And by that time, we're hoping the local government mutual will be in a position to quote. Now, I will ask the lead member, Councillor Poland, if he would like to say anything else on this issue. It doesn't look as though he, oh, yes.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. If I was to say any more, I'd be repeating either what you've just said or reading the report. So I think you summarised it very well.
Thank you. Thank you. And Adrian, is there anything that you would like to bring to our attention you feel that hasn't been covered?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Just to clarify, it's more that we've decided now is not the time to move over to the local government mutual, which is an insurance provider that's still under formulation. So it's more that we've decided, given the current situation we're in with COVID-19, that it's safer to remain with our current insurers for another 12 months rather than change over to the local government mutual with all the potential uncertainties that would entail.
Yep. Thank you, Adrian. I think that clear. I almost thought that was read, but yeah, very good point. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Poland to propose the report. Could you unmute yourself, James? Unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry,
Yeah.
I thought I'd pressed my space bar, but it didn't work. So here we go. So I would like to propose the recommendation on page 39 for the reason on page 39.
Okay, so we'll go through the vote.
Tom, we need a second.
Oh, yes, we do need a second. Could I ask Councillor Boker to second it?
She's muted.
Okay. Councillor Boker, can I ask you to second this and unmute yourself? Muffled. There we go.
Councillor Barkley, would you like me to second? I think that's what
I would. That would be very good. Yeah, thank you. So I'll go through the roll call. So Councillor Mercer, for or against?
For.
Councillor, let's have a look. Councillor Taylor, for or against? For. Councillor Taylor is for. Councillor Harper Davis, you proposed it.
Yep, for.
Councillor Poland, for. Councillor Smidovich.
For.
Councillor Boker, for or against? Unmute yourself. I can lip read. Can you unmute yourself? It's a good job I can lip read. Councillor Boker, would you just state that you are for or against this? You're muted. Right. We're not going to get that, but she is holding a hand up to agree to it. So, Councillor Rollins, for or against?
For.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is passed. Now, before we close the meeting, I'm going to ask the leader to, it's almost like a pantomime. He's come back.
I was watching.
Like a magic genie.
I was watching.
Okay, thank you, leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barkley. And thank you very much for everyone for partaking in today's meeting. Thank you very much to Councillor Draycott for asking her questions, and for Richard Bennett for answering all of our questions on item 6. I think this evening has demonstrated that having sort of thorough debate online is very much possible. I think this meeting has probably been one of the most open and transparent that we've had. Probably more people watching this meeting this evening than normally through our cabinet meetings, and that means that hopefully anyone who has a spare hour or two and would like to see what their local council is doing now has the opportunity to switch on their computer, open their iPad, look on their phone, and hey presto, here we are to entertain them and inform them, and hopefully to explain a bit about what we do at Charnwood Borough Council. So thank you very much to all of you this evening. Good night and God bless.